Welcome everyone to the July meeting of the Warren County Board of Supervisors. Please rise while Supervisor Loeb leads us in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read the roll.
Mr. Leggett?
Here.
Mr. Diamond?
Here.
Mr. McDevitt?
Here.
Ms. Bramer?
Here.
Mr. Loeb?
Here.
Mr. Driscoll?
Here.
Mrs. Frazier?
Here.
Mr. Simpson?
Here.
Ms. Hogan?
Here.
Mr. Dickinson?
Here.
Mr. Molino?
Here.
Mr. Strauss?
Here.
Mr. Wild?
Here.
Mr. Beatty?
Here.
Mr. McGowan?
Bells on.
Mr. Sokol?
Here.
Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Ms. Hyde?
Here.
Mr. Garrity?
Here.
Chairman Conover?
Here. Should all have received the minutes of our meeting on June 19th. That was the evening meeting. Chair will entertain a motion regarding the minutes. Mr. Garrity, to approve. Is there a second? Second, Ms. Frazier. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of June 19th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And now we'll move right into presentation of Employee of the Month. I'll turn it over to our County Administrator.
Good morning, everybody. As you may recall, we had to postpone the June Employee of the Month award until today. That was due to the nighttime meeting that we had in June. But our Employee of the Month for June is here today, and it's my pleasure to introduce Eric Mastriani from the Health Services Department. Eric, could you stand?
Well, thank you very much.
Now, so many of the services that our county employees provide are geared to helping those in our community who are vulnerable, and this month's honoree serves the smallest of those vulnerable residents and their families. For more than a decade, Eric has been a valued member of our preschool special education team, which serves children with developmental challenges from birth to 5 years old. Eric joined the department in 2008 as a part-time early intervention services coordinator, and he went full-time in 2011. And this past January, he was promoted to the Children with Special Needs Program Manager. Every day, Eric works directly with families, evaluators, service providers, specialists, school districts, and other community agencies to facilitate personalized plans that help these kids overcome their challenges and achieve their full potential. His clients come from all economic and geographic backgrounds, and as any of us know whose families or friends have encountered autism and other disabilities, these challenges can touch any of us, and these services really make a difference. Eric's families view him as a trusted resource for their child's success. He is also a model employee. He's well respected by his colleagues, and for his knowledge, for his work ethic, and for his willingness to help out wherever he's needed. And as our Health Services Director, Janelle Jones, stated in her nomination of Eric, he consistently seeks to improve all aspects of the programs he works with without being asked. His efforts enhance the roles of others involved, ultimately bettering the very programs and services that the county offers. And Eric is also active in the community. He coaches soccer, hockey, and baseball, and he and his wife do an annual fund drive for hemophilia. It's with great pleasure that I introduce our June Employee of the Month, Eric Mastriani. Eric, could you come up, please? We have one more award this morning. It's for our July Employee of the Month, and our Tourism Director, Joanne Conley, is asked to do the honors herself, so I'd like to invite her up to the podium without objection.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ellen Himmelblau has been a valuable employee with the Tourism Department for 15 years. Ellen's responsibilities have changed over the years as the job itself has evolved. Her responsibilities began as data entry, answering the phones, and mailing out thousands of travel guides. She has welcomed the changes of the digital age and worked to transform information systems and processes within the department while still keeping interactions personal and professional. Throughout her years, Ellen has established friendships with hundreds of business owners and event organizers in every corner of the county, and all of the supervisors in this room as well. She can recall information about a particular business from memory and recognizes people when they walk in the door. She will go out of her way to explain to a business owner how our department can benefit and promote that particular business. She's been known to drop off travel guides before or after business hours. She represents the area with a smile at consumer shows and engages everyone with enthusiasm and a personal warmth that reflects the welcoming nature of our area. Ellen is someone who will hesitate to ask for help from her coworkers, but she's the first to lend a hand or offer words of encouragement. She is a true friend to each of her coworkers. Most importantly, Ellen is kind, considerate, conscientious at the core. She is patient with callers who are looking for a last-minute recommendation. She has always been meticulous when it comes to completing any task that is asked of her. Ellen will be missed by the tourism department, her coworkers at the county, and the friends she has made in the business community when she retires at the end of August. Thank you, Ellen.
You're all set.
At this time, I'd like to declare a public hearing open on the tentative operating budget for Adirondack Community College for fiscal year 2019-2020, and ask the clerk to read the notice.
Notice is hereby given that the Board of Supervisors of the County of Warren, New York is considering the adoption of a tentative operating budget for Adirondack Community College for the fiscal year 2019-20. Notice is further given that pursuant to a resolution adopted by the Board of Supervisors on June 19, 2019, a public hearing will be held by the Board of Supervisors at the Supervisors' Room in the Warren County Municipal Center, 1340 State Route 9, Queensbury, New York, on July 19, 2019, at 10 a.m., at which time and place all persons interested in the matter of such proposed budget will be heard concerning same. A copy of the tentative operating budget for Adirondack Community College for fiscal year 2019-20 is available for inspection during regular business hours by contacting the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors at the above stated address and may be viewed on the Warren County website.
Is there anyone wishing in the audience wishing to address the board during this public hearing? There being no one, I will close the public hearing. I'll now open a public hearing on the possible submission of one or more community development block grant applications for the 2019 program year, and request that the clerk of the board read the notice of the public hearing.
Warren County will hold a public hearing on July 19, 2019 at the County Municipal Center located at 1340 State Route 9 in Queensbury, New York for the purpose of hearing public comments on community needs for Warren County and to discuss the possible submission of one or more community development block grant applications for the 2019 program year. The CDBG program is administered by the New York State Office of Community Renewal and will make available to eligible local governments approximately $47 million for the 2019 program year for housing, economic development, public facilities, public infrastructure, and planning activities, with the principal purpose of benefiting low and moderate income persons. The hearing will provide further information about CDBG program and will allow for citizen participation in the development of any proposed grant applications and/or to provide technical assistance to develop alternate proposals. Comments on the CDBG program or proposed projects will be received at this time. The hearing is being conducted pursuant to Section 570.486, Subpart 1 of the CFR, and in compliance with the requirements of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974 as amended.
Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the board regarding this? Pat?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much. Today is the first public hearing to meet the requirements of the citizen participation plan and the application which is being submitted to the Division of Housing and Community Renewal through the CFA process. The purpose of the submission will be to undertake a county housing needs report and market analysis. And we are in the process of preparing this application. I have provided you a one-page information sheet. I think the most critical thing of this under the section identified as project background is that the Planning Department continues to monitor issues concerning affordable housing in our communities. And local officials have expressed concerns that there's a need for current information on the extent of housing needs and programs that can address the creation of new housing. We have 2 local communities that have completed a housing study and a market analysis for a project that will be in the city of Glens Falls, and this will add valuable information to our to this hopeful study that will get funded. Local officials will be encouraged to participate in collecting housing quality information within their respective communities to supplement reporting that's being completed by the county. It's anticipated that a working group of local officials and housing providers will be convened to provide guidance through the term of a prospective funding award. And there are several supervisors here, particularly those who within some of our well-traveled tourism communities that we desire to go beyond the limits of the study and look at issues concerning seasonal workforce housing. So this is, I know it's important to several supervisors. They've indicated such. The maximum amount of money, pardon me, for planning grants is $50,000 based on information provided by the agency and from other studies that have been done. We anticipate that counting its application will be no more than $25,000. There is a 5% local share to that. That would be, if 25 is the number, it would be $1,250. So it's a small amount, and the Planning Department will provide in-kind services to facilitate the grant. So the application is due next week. If there are any comments or questions, or there are folks in your community or you as supervisors would like to add a statement or commentary about that, we'd be happy to receive it, and you could email me at the Planning Department. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Tadich at this time? Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the board regarding this app? Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm Stu Baker. I'm the senior planner with the town of Queensbury. As many of you may know, in January of this year, the town finished an affordable housing strategy, which was funded with community development block grant funds. Strategy option number 4 that came out of that effort calls for creation of a collaborative and detailed housing market preference study, which is exactly what's being proposed with the county CDBG application. Accordingly, I wholeheartedly support the application and look forward to assisting in this study. Just want to quote one line that came out of the town's affordable housing strategy, and that is this: studies such as the one being proposed are often key to getting the housing industry to move forward by supplying the type of market information developers need to design and obtain financing for such projects. So the study that's being proposed through the CDBG funds can really provide the market information that can get developers moving, making housing for actually all income levels, but especially for low and moderate income households. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board at this time? There being no one, I will close the public hearing. Report of the chairman of the board. Since our last meeting on June 19th, I attended committee meetings on the 24th and 25th. Those committee meetings included economic development, support services, county facilities, public works, and budget. Just as an aside, I was very pleased, Frank, to listen to the discussion on establishing reserve funds in the county budget for certain types of activities, and look forward to the recommendations of the Budget Committee relative to those reserve funds. On June 25th, I attended the EMS Task Force meeting. I believe Supervisor Leggett will have have a report relative to that a little later. On July 1, I attended Personnel, Higher Education, and Finance, and then on Saturday, July 6th, I attended the Fund for Lake George annual meeting at the Sagamore. It was very well attended. There had to be possibly as many as 400 people there. And I just want to, at this time, congratulate the town of Queensbury, John, on winning the Langmuir Award, which was presented to the town of Queensbury at that meeting for their work in lake protection. Congratulations, John. On July 10th, I attended the ribbon cutting on the new, and I think I have this correct, Centralized Arraignment Park, CAP. Makes the acronym test, but I'm not sure it does better than that, but we'll work on that. But it was a project that has covered a number of years, and it really, everyone involved in the project, congratulations. And of course, this process goes all the way back to Supervisor Gerard and of course Montesi, Supervisor Ron Montesi, and it has been very well led by to completion by Supervisor Leggett from Chester. So once again, to our county departments that have been involved, and to all that have been involved, congratulations on this completion of this project. On July 16th, we had a visit from the Deputy Commissioner of Agamarcus, David Volesky. He was on his way up to Clinton County and put us on a schedule to stop just to say hello and introduce himself. We have his business card if any of you might be interested in his name and his contact information. And then on July 16th, I attended the Lake George Lake Champlain Regional Planning Board meeting. And that concludes my report. Report of committee chairs. Supervisor Loeb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Support Services met last month. We had a very exciting meeting, topped off by a scintillating discussion about autopsies and the process that we're going to follow in Warren County. There's a relevant resolution in your packet today. Upcoming, just a preview, we're going to have further discussion about the electronic polling books, which we're going to start using this year, and that will affect all of our towns. That is, all the voters in your towns will start experiencing the use of the electronic poll books. There's also going to be a presentation by Amy Clute regarding a significant budget decrease in her self-insurance, workers' comp self-insurance budget. A couple other things I want to talk about. One is on Tuesday there was an article in the Post-Star about a budget deal between in the Congress, between the Congress and the White House. The White House has its representatives in the discussion. The House of Representatives has Nancy Pelosi in the discussion, and the Senate has their representative Mitch McConnell in the discussion. And a very interesting, actually inspiring paragraph, part of the paragraph. The duo of Pelosi, Democrat, California, McConnell, Republican, Kentucky, is a partnership of necessity. Well, after all, isn't that what everything is here as elected officials? But when they team up, as they did on government spending, on the government spending deal in February, they are virtually unstoppable. That's the type of stuff that we want to hear about what's going on in Washington. Which segues into our trip that I took with Supervisors Matt Simpson, Gene Molino, and Kevin Garrity. We went down to Washington, and I have to say it was a fantastic, hot day, but a productive, very informative day of presentations. The presentation itself was in the Eisenhower building? The Eisenhower building. Lasted 3.5 hours, and we listened to 13 speakers, and they entertained a lot of questions. I will say right off, where everybody might have the question, there were, you could use words like paradox and incongruous. There was hyperbole. There was hooray for our team. But you probably will recognize when you go into an environment, if there's a different accent, you start picking up that accent. If there's a different lingo, you start picking up that lingo. It doesn't change the meat and potatoes of what you do as a person. So when we listen to these folks, we heard considerable in-depth discussions, and I'll just give you a few. They talked about the Mission Act and how veterans can now, instead of having to go to a VA center, they can go to a network provider in their area. If you live in Albany, that really doesn't matter. If you live in Glens Falls, it really doesn't matter. We have such great access to services here. But in, say, Utah, where you could be 4 hours away, easily 4 hours away from the center, this comes in, it's a positive step forward. It's not the end-all. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. But it's a step forward. They talked about the problem of suicides with veterans and the fact that we need more mental health professionals. And an interesting point that was mentioned was, in the discussion of suicides, we have to normalize the discussion. It can't be something that is hush-hush that we only talk about in a private company. It has to be something you talk about at the dinner table in order for us to make progress. Along the same line of needing more health professionals, they pointed out that we need the health professionals in the public area. We cannot be providing mental health services in our jails. They talked about energy, and it's like you read in the paper how one side is all they want to do is burn coal, and the other side all they want to do is have solar energy. And yet the folks from the Energy Department were talking about a multifaceted approach where we need solar energy, we need hydropower, we need coal, all the different things in balance in order for us to succeed in the future. They talked about opportunity zones. You're familiar with it. All over the years we've had different approaches to opportunity zones. But what stuck out with me was not the fact that they're there, the fact that they recognize the reason they're there, in that the demographics of the areas are at such a stark contrast to the surrounding areas. Lower unemployment, income levels, graduation rates. All of these lower graduation rates, all of these things go into the need for the opportunity zones. And finally, but it's not, there were so many things. Finally, the last speaker, the next to the last speaker was a very lively speaker. And you say, how can anyone follow this person? And he was talking about opportunity zones, and he was a former NFL player. And you say, and he was like, and no notes. He just spoke for 10 minutes. And you say, man, I feel sorry for Frank Brogan. He's the Assistant Secretary for Elementary and Secondary Education. Boy, that's going to fall like a lead balloon after this fellow in the opportunity zones. And yet, the best speaker of the day was Frank Brogan, and he talked about education. He started out, I think he was a middle school teacher, high school principal, superintendent, president of university systems in Florida, lieutenant governor in Florida. And the thing that stood out was that he said, we have to re-engineer the way we approach education. We have technology now, but we can't use technology just as a plug-in workbook or a plug-in textbook. We can't replace teachers with technology. Teachers have to change their approach to work with the technology. How that approach is going to be displayed, we don't know yet. This is something that's going to have to evolve and change. But he says, here I am from the university system, and I'm going to be the first to tell you, not every student should go to a university. It's not appropriate. Many decades ago, we came up, they didn't use the word BOCES, but vocational training, BOCES, we're all familiar with that, as a way to train people in trades. And then somewhere along the line, and we saw this at SUNY Adirondack, somewhere along the line that became a stigma, and we don't want to send our kids to BOCES because it will reflect badly on them. I think it was back in the 90s where SUNY Adirondack said, well, we don't want to be a VOTEC school, we want to be a liberal arts school. So they started de-emphasizing the trade aspect. He says, we've got to turn that around. What the federal government did was start to de-emphasize vocational training. We've got to turn that around because everybody needs to have a job. Everybody's going to have training. There are a lot of different types of training which just aren't appropriate to get training for in a college. So we've got to start in the high schools and then post-high school training. But there's a wide variety of training that we can support and we should support other than just college. So that was a great ending to the conference. Food is pretty expensive down in Washington. I will also point out that you saw a lot of electric scooters, not just for the tourists, but business folks going to work, wearing their suits, going down the street on the electric scooters. That was pretty interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Loeb. Oh, and thank you for that report on Veterans Park, the message you sent.
Oh, you're welcome.
Supervisor Driscoll.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. No report this morning.
Supervisor Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our Committee of Health, Human and Social Services met on June the 25th, and we had reports from the Department of Training, Social Services, and Public Health. But before I get into the resolutions, I need to make a motion to withdraw Resolution number 314, and I would like to ask Mr. Moore if he would explain to us why we're...
Sure, I'd be happy to. We have a motion to withdraw Resolution 314, seconded by Supervisor Simpson. Mr. Moore.
Sure. This is for children with special needs transportation, which we need to have in place for September. There was one response to this particular RFP, but the entity that submitted the response misread the RFP, so their price ended up being about 30% higher than it ought to be. So what we need to do is at the next Health Committee meeting, we will reject that bid, and we're reissuing another RFP, and we'll still have enough time to get this in place.
Thank you.
So you've heard the motion, and there's a second. I'll call the question. All those in favor of withdrawing the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution is withdrawn. Ms. Frazier.
Okay, so we have Resolution 313, which authorizes an agreement with Washington, Saratoga, Warren, Hamilton, Essex Board of Cooperative Services. Deals with the testing and secondary completion. 315 is authorizing a continuing agreement with New York State Department of Health and Health Research for public health emergency preparedness. 316, amending an agreement with Honeywell to purchase 5 Genesis Personal Touch tablet kits. And then last is 317, authorizing agreement with Ademco, again, to purchase 5 Genesis Personal Touch tablet A kits with scale. And that's all. I'd appreciate your support, but I also attended the Lake Champlain, Lake George Regional Planning Board this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frazier. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Supervisor Loeb for that report. Only a couple of things I could add to it. I was asked at the last board meeting what we were going to bring back to Warren County, and this morning I gave to Chairwoman Bramer a document to look at. It deals with HABs, harmful algal blooms,
and the issue that's looming in all of our lakes and bodies of water. And one of the things that was interesting at that conference is they keyed in on these HABs, and it's a real concern at the federal level. It's happening not just here in the Adirondacks, but it's happening all throughout the country. And it's a serious issue with such a small amount of fresh water, clean water, that we actually have in our country. So we're going to be talking about, I've asked her to put that on the agenda for the next Environmental Concerns Committee. And so that was encouraging because I know that they've worked on funding and they acknowledged the issue. The other thing we talked, Bill Loeb said something about the cost of the food. I found it interesting. We were in a shop getting coffee before the conference, and I just wanted a sparkling water, and I looked, and I ordered a sparkling water, and it was a Saratoga water. I said, wow, Saratoga water here in Washington, D.C., and it was only $2.50. I said, go figure that. It's $4.50 in Saratoga to buy a Saratoga water, but we traveled all the way to Washington, D.C., and it's $2.50, so I had two. But, I want to thank my colleagues here for allowing us to go, because it really is a valuable experience trip. We walked away with contacts for senior officials within the administration, and they're willing to listen to our issues and look for solutions. So, again, I want to thank you all. And now I'll do my report. DPW, we did meet on June 25th. We had one resolution that came out of that committee meeting. It's resolution number 319, and it's awarding a bid and authorizing agreement with the Northeast Petroleum Technologies Company for improvements to the Warren County Floyd Bennett Memorial Airport fueling site. We also talked about Swede Mountain Fire Tower. It's been a project that there's been a lot of support for, and we heard from Superintendent Hajos that it may require about $3,000 worth of work to secure that. The next step is there's a meeting that we're going to have with Lime Timber's representatives to talk about the potential agreement that we would need to access, and also for a trail. I've also done a little bit of work on talking to Mariah Schock about potentially building the proposed trail if we get that far, which they do a lot of trail building throughout the area. They're very helpful. They enjoy doing it, and it's a good use of, good experience for those people that are there. And there was a negotiating team meeting yesterday concerning the railroad negotiations with URAL. It was reported to me that it went very well, and the parameters on both sides, each entity's concerns were talked about, and I believe that there's going to be another meeting discussed on moving forward with figuring out if there's an agreement, if we can get to an agreement, if we, where we're going with it. So that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start my report, and I hate to sound like a broken record, technology for our students is incredibly important, but it doesn't go anywhere when you don't have reliable broadband. We need to keep working on that. So thank you for anything any of you can do to make that happen for all of the residents of Warren County. For now, cooperative extension. Everybody get your calendars out. August 24th is the benefit golf tournament at Cronin. It is the most fun golf tournament of the year, so I expect to see you all there and everybody stays around. Amy Sabatis is here today, puts a lot of work into that tournament. It's really a great time. Well spent day. Cornell received a second grant of $2,500 from International Paper to put on more game of logging safety classes. We've heard all about those. They're really valuable for all of our people working with chainsaws out there. And the Master Gardeners will be holding an online mum sale in the fall, so plan your gardens accordingly. Thank you.
All set? Supervisor Dickinson.
I attended a lot of meetings this month as usual, and remember hardly anything, so I have no report.
You never disappoint. Supervisor Merlino.
He's a tough act to follow. Tourism did not meet in July, but we're planning on one for late August. Right now, they're working on all the fall advertising and to keep promotion going at a high rate it is. The only thing I will say, thank you, Mr. Loeb, for that, covered that whole program. It was very interesting. And Matt, I have a picture of you with that Saratoga water, if you want that. And the only other thing I will say that Mr. Loeb was very courteous to all of us, and we enjoyed being with him. But he found out that 98-degree temperature kind of hurt the top of his head while we were walking around, so we had to find a store to go get him a hat. But he wouldn't buy a mega hat; he had to buy a White House hat. But we all let him have it on, and we walked with him. So thank you. That's the end of my report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Stroh.
No committee report this month. Thank you.
Supervisor Well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like Supervisor Dickinson, I also attended a lot of meetings, and I do remember a number of things that occurred, but none of significance to report today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Supervisor Beatty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Facilities met. Resolutions 301 to 305 are pretty self-explanatory. I believe we will need, excuse me, need to amend Resolution 304 because we will be going, well, we may, if we amend it, going to a 2-bay lease instead of the 1-bay lease. As we are moving forward, we're seeking a facility for emergency facilities department. So, do I do that now, Mr.
You can do it
Chairman?
now without objection. Absolutely amend it.
Okay, so I'd like to make the amendment to that resolution that we keep the 6-month term of the lease, but we amend it from 1 bay to 2 bays and from a rent of $6,500 a month to $7,000 a month for that 6-month term.
The amendment is to amend, well, let me get a second on that. Supervisor Loeb on the second. Let me recite that for everyone. It's to keep the term 6 months. It is to lease 2 bays, not 1, and it is to lease those bays at a income of rent of $7,000 as opposed to $6,500 per month. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. You've heard the motion and you've heard the second. Further discussion on the amendment? We're ready for the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And we will deal with the resolution under resolutions.
Okay, thank you. And just a quick update, the 2030 task force, which is assigned to try to turn the population loss in Warren County, met. We had our first organizational meeting, and I'd like to also say that Dr. Amy Hogan Moulton has also been added to the task force. Should bring in expertise in the healthcare industry that should be very helpful. We're going to deal on the positive with that committee and what we can do to change from a positive standpoint, but we won't be naive and not and pass over what headwinds are blowing our way. There'll be a roundtable discussion that will be announced in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Dr. Duffy at SUNY Adirondack has been kind enough to lend the facility there for a roundtable discussion. The outpouring has been overwhelming of people who want to be involved, who want their positions to be heard. And so this roundtable discussion will include approximately 10 people from different parts of the county and different and diverse areas of expertise in their opinion. And so once I get the exact date, I will be glad to pass it along to everyone. Hopefully you'll attend, as we are still in the task force in the information and data gathering phase, and will be for some time, as getting more information and data will help us formulate correct course of action. So I just thought I'd give you a quick update on that, and that will conclude my report.
Thank you. Supervisor McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank you, Mr. Loeb, for your short version of bringing home really, you touched base on the trades in our youths. And being in the trades my whole life, I find the people I work with are not much younger than me and older. And the skills of working with your hands is falling away from our younger people, and something's got to carry on. You know, I have an ability to fix just about anything and work on anything, and I'm grateful for the education I've gotten in taking the programs that I have taken to further my skills in doing that. So, and working on broadband to helping this, because it all ties in together. So really, both of you, but thank you very much for bringing that. And like I said, I feel we all need to push our children, either college, but if they have a gift to excel at using their hands, I can't complain, because I just get busier and busier, it seems, every day. So thank you again. And I have no committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Sokol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finance did meet on July 1st. We only have 5 resolutions this month, and they are 299, 300, and 322 through 324. So it was a very short agenda. I really don't have much to report on, but our esteemed County Treasurer, Mike Swan, would like to address.
Absolutely, without objection, sure.
Good
morning, Mike.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Just a few quick things. Last Friday, I sent out the sales tax analysis that I did. If everybody, I have some hard copies here if somebody needs one, and I'll take any questions concerning that. Our collections of sales tax is still running even. I think we're up just like a hair of a %, but that's good. We're still running well. The Indian casino payments, I hate to report, are steadily decreasing. We started out at about $125,000 a quarter. We're down to about $90,000 a quarter now. So that's steadily decreasing. And just a quick update on the occupancy tax enforcement that we're working on. That's going very well. I'm in negotiations with everybody except one property that we're dealing with. So I think we're going to work out positively on that. And I just want to call out to the county attorney's office. Thank you. The hard work that they've done has made this possible. And that's it. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Yes.
Supervisor Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned in your report, the Budget Committee did meet on June 25th, and the meeting was basically a discussion about establishing reserves. There were multiple ideas. We didn't really set any priorities. Some of the examples were SUNY capital improvement projects, the Civic Center, the buildings here on the campus, Countryside, and a suggestion from the Treasurer's Office was sick time payouts upon retirement. I haven't had a chance to meet with the Treasurer to put together a proposal. Hopefully I will. If we do, I'll try to have a meeting maybe August 1st. If not, we'll do it next cycle.
Very good. Thank you. Supervisor Hyde.
No report.
Supervisor Garrity.
Again, I'd like to also thank my colleagues here for allowing us to go to D.C. The only thing I can add to Bill's report was there was a nice state representative there. One of our colleagues in New York State had just purchased a bunch of materials to do the recycling. He was concerned about the recycling market, how it had changed, and Larry Cudlow talked to us about recycling and said just stay there. They're looking to work with other countries to improve the recycling coming out of the U.S. right now. So, but it is a concern for everybody. I went to 5 committee meetings this month, APA, local government, also intercounty. We went to Lavender Farm in Whitehall, attended railroad negotiations, the EMS task force meeting, and we have a late resolution from personnel and higher education appointing Mike Fiddle to the Warren, Washington County's IDA. This is the Washington County request. So that's resolution 325. Other than that, good trip. We had a lot of fun, and we all travel well.
Thank you.
Oh, I got searched in case that comes up ever. Going on? on, are going on in Albany, and going on in D.C., and I would like to report that Mr. Molino does know where he lives, but he's not quite sure how old he is. I will explain to you later on. But he is friends with the Secret Service. They know him by a first name.
Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Criminal Justice and Public Safety met on June 28, 2019. There are 6 resolutions before you. One is for repairs to the jail facility for the Sheriff's Office. The other 5 are contracts with 5 schools for the school resource officers. The Criminal Justice and Public Safety also forwarded staffing requests personnel for the public defender, the district attorney, and the Sheriff's Office as well. So that's it for criminal justice and public safety. The EMS task force met on June 25th. We discussed the legal structure of an EMS system that can serve the county. This is based on further review of how other counties have done it. This was reported back by County Administrator Moore, who had visited Albany County along with County Attorney Hussain and Under Sheriff Lamery, as well as phone interviews with Columbia County. So we may very well need to have special state legislation in order to enact this for our county, so we are now working on that. We also discussed ways to keep the public and stakeholders involved in this process, be able to keep the word out there and have seek input and to gather support as we move along. We're also have discussed and will be working on developing partnerships with local health networks such as Hudson Headwaters. And we also discussed applying for a shared service grant, which Essex County had done and received, so that could be an avenue to help fund some of this transition in the future. The next task force meeting is yet to be determined. There's a little more homework to be done, but we will be sending out notices shortly on that. Also attended the CAP facility ribbon cutting on Wednesday, July 17th. I must say it was a good moment to be there, and also a sad one because Supervisor Ron Matesi had done quite a lot for that, and to see that completion now without him was a sad moment. Also attended the IDA board meeting on Monday, July 15th, and want to remind everybody that there's a Common Ground Alliance Forum meeting next Wednesday on the 24th up in Lake Placid. It's a great thing to attend. Thank you.
Thank you for that report, Supervisor Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No reports today.
Supervisor McDivitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have an opportunity to attend a very well-done program in Bolton on Thursday, June 27th. Basically, if there's anyone that's interested in clean water, this was something that I thought made a whole lot of sense. It was an inspection program for people that will monitor septic systems within the town of Bolton. I think there are 3 communities that probably ought to be recognized: the town of Bolton, I think Queensbury, and Lake George, for their ongoing efforts to ensure clean water in our community. So thank you, Ron, for the invite, and it makes a lot of sense. So, secondly, very close to where I live, there's a new Stewart's that is making an effort to build a new building and add gas pumps to this particular piece of property. And I would like to stress a couple of points as it relates to Stewart's. Stewart's is in my opinion, is a Class A company. They, I think, ultimately attempt to do the right thing. But this is a much larger structure, and they're asking to sell gasoline in a situation where they are currently not selling gasoline. I would ask the Stewart's Corporation for a couple of considerations. Ultimately, make this structure and this endeavor appropriate and in keeping with our neighborhoods. We need to preserve our neighborhoods, our quality of life, and our property values. We have an elementary school 2 blocks from the proposed new Stewart's. Our children in the city of Glens Falls walk to school. Safety clearly is an issue. Currently, gasoline is not provided, services are not provided at this situation. I would propose that Stewart's not put in any more than 2 stations, which would enable them to provide 4 gas pumps. I would ask respectfully that our city fathers in Glens Falls delay this project until we get it right. Litigation is on its way unless Stewart's gets this right. Let's get together, let's mediate, let's talk, and let's get this project correct on the front end. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you very much. Environmental Concerns and Real Property Tax Services Committee did meet on June 28th. I was not able to be present, as well as a few others, so I do want to thank Supervisor Simpson for chairing the meeting that day, and we did not have a quorum, so no actions were taken. We had some updates. We do have our next committee meeting is on Monday, and I will try to get the new HABS item added to the agenda. One thing that I noticed reading through it quickly is that they are using the Lake George example heavily to rely on for their efforts going forward, so I want to applaud us for everything that we've been doing and hope that we will continue to do to lead the way forward for all of these other water bodies. The other thing that we will be talking about on Monday is the terms and conditions for the foreclosure sale that has been going round and round, and we had made some additions. I think our county attorney made a few more, so I'm hopeful that she can talk to that on Monday, speak to that issue. As well as I did receive some comments from the Warren County real property lawyers, one of the lawyers anyway, that he reached out to me. So I will look at those and forward those to you, Mary, so you can take a look at them. There is also one resolution in our packet. There it is, 312. Just chargebacks of taxes. So if you have any questions, you can ask Lexi on that one. The other thing that I want to mention is a thank you to Ryan Moore and Tammy DiLorenzo, as well as Julie Butler and Frank Morehouse and Chris Belden, all for working with me to update our fleet policy to add a green fleet policy to that provision so that we are looking at purchasing the most fuel economically responsible vehicles that we can going forward. So that's really great. Also, I did attend the railroad negotiation meeting yesterday as part of the team, and it was a very civil meeting. We do need a lot more information in order to come to a clear decision about what is best for Warren County. So I look forward to receiving additional information from United Rail. And I also want to bring your attention to the piece of paper that was on your desk today. This is from the Warren County Safe and Quality Biking Organization, and it's their written position on rails to trails for Warren County. Finally, I'm very glad to hear that everything went well in DC and you were able to behave yourselves in a bipartisan manner. I do want to make a comment that Warren County is a great place to live and work, and I'm very proud to work with my colleagues here every day to make our county better for us now, all of our residents and tourists, and for our children in the future. So thank you for representing us well.
Amen.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. County Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 4 employee milestones to announce this month. First, with 40 years, is William Benson from the Sheriff's Department. 35 years, Colleen Sullivan from Social Services. Henry Frazier from DPW is celebrating 30 years, and Amy Brown from Social Services has been with us for 25. Thanks to all of you for your dedicated service, and congratulations. Much of what I intended on bringing up has already been spoken to by various supervisors. I'll touch on it very briefly. On Thursday, June 27th, management held our first strategy meeting to prepare for the upcoming collective bargaining negotiations with CSCA. That contract is up at the end of this year, so I'm very much looking forward to those discussions. On July 10th, Wednesday, I participated in the ribbon cutting for the CAP Court. I want to thank Judge Gary Hobbs for his help in putting that event together, as well as his leadership in general in establishing this court, which is going to save county staff time, and it'll save money as well. Thanks also to the supervisors and the county staff who attended and have helped along the way in establishing this court. On Friday the 11th, as Supervisor Loeb mentioned, the budget team held its first 2020 budget meeting, and it's good news so far. The workers' comp self-insurance budget has about $115,000 in savings for next year compared to this year, and that should help the majority of plan participants with their budgets, and that includes most every town as well as EMS squads and fire districts. The decrease is due to claims experience. We have a great safety program in place, and this is also the only program I've ever worked with that fully funds its liabilities. Most of these funds, at least on paper, are broke. So a big thanks to Amy Clute and her staff and all the others who make this program a success. The United Rail negotiation, as has been mentioned, was yesterday. Was a very civil and productive conversation. We're still a ways out from potentially getting to a deal, and we do need some additional direction from the Public Works Committee. We will be updating that committee next week on the details of that discussion and getting their direction on how best to move forward. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ryan. Report of the county attorney.
No report this month.
No report. Reading of communications.
Warren County Probation Department report of criminal and family workloads for May 2019. Town of Queensbury Resolution Number 258 of 2019, setting public hearing on a proposed local law to establish a temporary moratorium on installation of ground-mounted solar energy systems. That public hearing is to be held on Monday, August 5th at 7 p.m. at the Queensbury Activity Center, 742 Bay Road, Queensbury, New York. Capital District Regional Off-Track Betting Corporation, May 2019 payment in the amount of $4,362, and 2018 benefit distribution payment number 1 and number 2, each in the amount of $6,348.
Reading of resolutions.
Proposed resolution numbers 299 through 324 were distributed to members of the Board of Supervisors and posted to the Warren County website on July 11th. Proposed resolution number 317 was amended after mailing. The revised version was emailed to the members of the Board of Supervisors and posted to the county website earlier in the week. Printed copy of that resolution is in your folder. A motion is needed to approve the amendments to Resolution 317 as provided.
Motion to approve the amendment. Mr. Simpson on the motion. Mr. Driscoll on the second. Discussion. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
And proposed resolution number 325 was developed after mailing. The resolution was posted to the county website and distributed to the Board of Supervisors. Printed copies are in your folders. A motion is needed to bring resolution 325 to the floor.
Mr. McGowan on the motion. Mr. Garrity on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now I'll open discussion on proposed resolutions and open it to the floor to anyone in the audience wishing to address the board regarding any resolution presently before the board. Mr. Whitehead.
Travis Whitehead, Queensbury. I'd like to take this opportunity to discuss Resolution 321, and I'm disappointed that our county attorney did not address this when she had the opportunity a few seconds ago. This is the resolution where you're being asked to sue David Decker for a matter of $50,000. My opinion is that it's a waste of time and money, even if you are successful, and I doubt you will be. The chances of collecting $50,000 from Mr. Decker has to be looked at as extremely low. But I also feel that there are several reasons why this lawsuit will be dismissed, and then again, a waste of time and money. First reason came out actually 4 years ago. Well, the bottom line is you're trying to go after the wrong people. The people that are obligated to pay you the $50,000 is the town of Queensbury. They have certified that you would get the money. They got the money from the state, and on the signature of the supervisor, certified that you would get your money, and you never have. Back in 2015, the issues that were boiling at that time came to light, at least to some people, but not to very many. They were withheld from us for years. But I'll read just one part of what the audit said in 2015, Town of Queensbury. The town neglected their fiduciary duties by allowing a subcontractor to manage and administer the contracts without sufficiently monitoring and reviewing the activities of that subcontractor. They're talking about David Decker. Back in that period of time, the town of Queensbury wrote checks, town checks, totaling over $3 million directly to David Decker. One of those checks included the $50,000 that you're due. Now, more recently than that, on June 27th of 2017, a letter was sent to Mr. Strauss from the State Department of State that reminded him that the town will take full responsibility for the acts and omissions of its subcontractors. That's a quote. And they pointed out where in the contract that they had between the state and the town where that is stated. So you're going after the wrong people, first of all. Second of all, this was brought to you, this issue was brought to you a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, with a note that we need to move on it, because if we don't move on it, we're going to be time barred. Well, as it turns out, you are time barred. Today is the 19th of July, 2019, and on July 11th, 2017, culminated a series of emails between the county and the town, where the town fully disclosed what had happened, that they had written a check to David Decker, that David Decker had obviously not gotten that money to you, and, good luck in collecting it. At that time, Mike Swan, without your approval, went ahead and said, well, I guess we'll go after him in court, or let the proceedings proceed, as he's at this time already arrested. Back on June 27th, so at any rate, you did have an additional amount of money due you from the town of Bolton. When that was brought up to the town of Bolton, they said, send us a bill and we'll pay it. I really do not know why you have not sent a bill to the town of Queensbury. For quite a period of time, it was thought that you did, but an extensive search of documents based on a FOIL request that I issued a month or so ago turned up the fact that you never have asked the town of Queensbury directly for the money. I don't know why you wouldn't do that first before going through all this trouble. So I will be following this lawsuit closely, because I don't really expect that you're going to go ahead and pay any attention to what I just had to say. But I will be following it closely, and I will see how that develops. And if you do get $50,000, I'll be the first to apologize to Ms. Cassane. But if you don't, you're going to continue to hear about this for however long this lasts in court. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board at this time? No one else. Let me ask first for roll call. Any requests for roll call? Mr. Dickinson?
321.
Roll call on 321. Any other requests for roll calls, Mr. Diamond?
304.
304, request for roll call on 304. Any other requests for roll call, Mr. Merlino?
It's not a roll call, but just an explanation on 318, the money from Charlie Wood Park that you have a motion on. Mayor Blaze called me yesterday. He couldn't make it here this morning, so I handed it all out to all you gentlemen and ladies something new that he came up with, which is a great deal because there was a lot in the paper about spending $300,000-400,000 for a fire tower. He found one, an original one. All the information's on there. I'm not going to read it, from 1916. That was taken down in 1970. Gentleman has it, restored it, wants to put it back up. He's looking for $150,000. Mayor needs this resolution passed if we pass it today because grant applications have to be in Monday. This grant will be now $120,000. So that'll only leave the county and the village in about excess of $30,000, which is split $15,500 by $9,500. So he's looking for your support just to get this going. But this will be, we don't need any engineer designs or any of the other stuff that make that $300,000-400,000 get up there. This is an original tower, the first metal tower in the state of New York, in the Adirondacks, and he really feels it's a well-ventured idea.
Any other requests for roll call? No other requests for roll call? Mr. Garrity.
Yes, I'd like to address Mr. Whitehead's comments about 321. Majority of these resolutions are brought forth by the committee, not by certain individuals. So to take issue with the county attorney, I think is a little disingenuous. If you look at the supervisors on that committee, they're the ones who wanted this brought forth to the full board. And one other comment, I certainly will sleep better tonight knowing that you're going to be watching this until the end of the trial. So, thank you. But I just think, let's put the onus where the onus is. It's on the committee.
Let's further discussion on 321. Further discussion on 321. Mr. Strauss.
Yeah, I'd like to correct some misinformation. But first I have to give a brief history. In or around 2001, the way I understand it, Alexander Treadwell, then Department of State, formed the Lake George Conference, which shifted into a new title, Lake George Coalition, that you're more familiar with. It was an organization set up by the Department of State. It was chaired by the Department of State. The agenda was set by the Department of State. The subcontractor was appointed by the Department of State. The town of Queensbury, the village of Lake George, and the town of Bolton were brave enough to sponsor some major grants with the understanding that the Department of State, with Dave Decker, would administrate those grants for the benefit of Lake George. And they did. So when Dan Stack signed the bills in 2008, and that's the time period I guess we're talking about, he got the approval of the Department of State to go ahead and sign it, and the Comptroller's office to go ahead and sign it. The Watershed Coalition, with all the approvals, were all in a row, and he did exactly what he was asked to do and required to do. All the bills that we were told to pay, we paid. So, you know, and then Mr. Whitehead pulled something out. He says nobody knew about it. That's completely untrue. There were public meetings on it. There were public discussions on the matter. And the town board was involved in everything. This is politics. It's nasty politics. The town of Queensbury did everything it was required to do. And some. We were one of the 3 communities that were brave enough to take on these loans that did so many good things for Lake George. And now, you know, some people, for political reasons, are trying to make an issue out of something that just really doesn't have any background or format. So I take exception on Mr. Travis Whitehead's accusation. We can go forward with the Decker case. The trial will determine who's guilty or not guilty.
there's a lot of nasty politics involved in this, and I've been the object of it, and I don't like it. I just want you to know things aren't right. And so a document that he quotes from was 9 years after 2008. 9 years. A lot happens in 9 years. All right. And at that time that statement was made, you know, the Department of State is kind of protecting its position here and kind of forgetting about what went on the previous, 15, 16, 17 years. So thank you for allowing me to posit Queensbury's position on this matter.
Thank you. Further discussion on 321. Mr. Moore?
Just on the notion that we're currently time barred, we're not. If you notice the first word in the title of this resolution is ratifying. We filed this lawsuit. We filed it on time. In a perfect world, we would have liked to have had your approval before doing that. We came to you with time to get that approval. We weren't given the tools to do that. So in a situation like that, I'm going to take the steps that I need to take to protect the county. If you disagree with that decision, you'll vote against the resolution today to ratify that decision, and we'll pull it. But this, for me, gets down to a very fundamental fact. We have one option in civil court to get that $50,000 back. We have no cause of action in court against the town of Queensbury. We've looked at every angle on this. We do have a cause of action against Mr. Decker. It's my job to protect the county. We've taken the steps that we need to take as staff. Again, if you disagree with those steps, vote against the resolution today. And as far as putting this on the county attorney or the county treasurer, it's not their decision. This was my decision. Buck stops here. So if you disagree with my decision, vote against the resolution. If you allow it to go forward and it goes wrong, it's on me.
Further discussion on Resolution 321. Mr. Beatty.
Thank you. I don't think this is that complicated. County short $50,000. The memo dated June 27, 2017 from the Department of State to Queensbury states, and I quote, "The town of Queensbury, as the grantee in receipt of New York State funding, remains responsible for the integrity of the expenditure of public grant funds, including those expended by its subcontractor throughout the entirety of the EPF contract timeframe." Now, I'm not a rocket scientist, but the Department of State says, Queensbury, you're responsible for paying for your subcontractors, which they clearly just said. Everybody can have a copy of this. Then I guess my question would be, isn't Queensbury responsible? It says they are responsible for the full payment, bingo, for its subcontractors, i.e. David Decker. That's what the Department of State said. The Department of State to the town of Queensbury. Now, all I want is everyone to be fair. You know, I'm a supervisor from the town of Queensbury. So if anyone would be quiet on this matter, it would be me. But I can't let an unfairness go by. If the town is required to pay the $50,000 according to the Department of State, then they're required. If they're not, they're not. I mean, this isn't complicated to me. If the state didn't believe that, they would never have written the memo to the town of Queensbury stating they are responsible for its entirety and its subcontractors. It can't be any clearer than that, at least to me. So this isn't politics. This is just doing the right thing. And I hate this. Everybody's got to scream politics at every 2 seconds. This isn't politics. Let's do the right thing. The county's been shorted $50,000. The state says Queensbury is responsible. It's not politics. It's doing the right thing. Thank you.
Supervisor Wild.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and I respectfully will differ in my opinion from Supervisor Beatty. I also represent the town of Queensbury at the county. And as Supervisor Hogan reminded me yesterday, I'm here to do the county's business. But I look at this somewhat differently, and I don't consider the buck stopping at Mr. Moore's desk. I believe it does, as Mr. Garrity said, stops at the committee. And I'm on that committee that made this decision. And I look at this quite simply. You follow the money. Where's the money? And it's with Decker. Queensbury fulfilled its obligation to provide this money to Decker. Decker is the one that, I don't know what he did with that money. There's accusations, there's court action. I can't determine whether he squandered this money, took this money, or he gave it to someone else. But I do agree we didn't get paid. But I don't necessarily agree that it's the town of Queensbury's fault. So I look at following the money. I also listened to what our attorney said. And our attorney said, as Mr. Moore stated, there is no action against the town of Queensbury. I'm not a lawyer. I trust what our counsel tells us. So the only action that we had was to go after Decker. And I supported that in the committee. And I guess it falls at my desk also for that decision. But we have to make tough decisions. This one wasn't that tough for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you. I just have 2 points. I do want to agree that this is our decision. This is not staff's decision. We're making the decision today with information that we've had in front of us for a couple of months. And I understand the point that Queensbury was responsible for distributing the money. They were. And then Supervisor Dan Steck wrote the check, paid the money. It went to Mr. Decker. That's, in my mind, where the money is. I do not see any cause of action against the town of Queensbury, who already paid the $50,000. So I'm in support of filing the lawsuit, which has already been filed, so that we can preserve our claims and do what we can in the civil action if we are not able to obtain restitution through the criminal action.
Thank you. Any other discussion on resolution, on this resolution? Supervisor Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to agree with Supervisor Bramer, Mr. Wild, simply because I think the responsibility lies with Decker, and I think he's made the right choice in this matter. And I want to go on the record that I wholeheartedly would not support any lawsuits that we were challenging the town of Queensbury to make them all. But I do want to ask a question to Supervisor Beatty, and the question is very directive, is what do you suggest we do?
Thank you. Can I answer that?
Just a moment. You're asking that of the chair. Just so,
Yes.
always speak through the chair.
Okay.
All right. And just
Chair,
so
I'd like to ask a question to Supervisor Beatty. We listened to your points of view, and it wasn't rocket science, but what are you suggesting we do?
Could I answer that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I'll allow it. Mr. Beatty, if you choose to answer.
Since we never sent Queensbury an invoice, here's a crazy idea. Why don't we send them an invoice? We sent Bolton Landing an invoice. They paid. Why don't we send them an invoice and let the town of Queensbury, Mr. Strau and his board determine, as well as Mr. Conover and his board determine to pay the bill. Let's see if they pay the bill or not. Here you go, Mr. Diamond.
All right. Thank you. Any other discussion on Resolution 321? Mr. McGowan.
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, also being a supervisor at Queensbury, you know, I've put a lot of thought into this, and then, you know, reading in the paper the other day, you know, Mr. Decker stating that he had, you know, he's the only money he received was the money that owed him. And we're going to have to wait to see how that comes out in court. One of the things that I have to say, Mr. Beatty makes a strong point, but I have to tend to go with the other side that, you know, one, we never did send an invoice, so really shame on us. It was kind of a gentleman's agreement, and without an invoice, Queensbury paid the gentleman that basically invoiced it. So, you know, it makes me, and then we've waited so long to bring this up into discussion. So, and I do believe is with Mrs. Bramer that thanks Mr. Moore for standing up and taking a hit for us, but it really does come down to committee, and that decision was made, so we're all going to have to take it on the shoulder for this one along with you. So, but we'll put you on top, okay? No, but I really think that we've done this, and we're just going to have to play it out right now.
Further discussion on 321? Very well. I'll close discussion on 321. A discussion on other resolutions. Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you. On 323, which is the fire tower, considering that we are here to be responsible for the county finances, I'm not going to support spending the money to rush through with the grant application. We have very talented staff in the county planning department who could put together the CFA grant, and it can go in during the next cycle without a cost of $5,000 plus travel and printing expenses. Thank you.
Any further discussion on 323? There being none, I'll close discussion on 323. Discussion on other resolutions. There being no discussion on Supervisor Leggett.
I'd just like to make a comment as I was reviewing through the packet that was sent to us, and I see the update on the adopting the amended fleet policy and the addition of the green fleet. This is where the Board of Supervisors comes in. Policy is one of our jobs to do here. So it's good to see a proactive approach coming from supervisors saying, what can we do here with the county, and amending a fleet policy and seeing it come through. Just a comment.
Very good. Supervisor Wild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 304.
304. Thank you.
This is the authorization of the lease agreement with D&G Recycling. I asked yesterday or the day before our county attorney for a copy of the lease agreement. It's not drafted yet. And as such, I can't support this without understanding what the terms are in this agreement. I understand it's 6 months. That kind of makes sense. I understand the rate is going up. It kind of makes sense. But what other terms do we have into this extension of the lease agreement that I deem as being important? And the reason is in months past, many of you have seen some of the issues that I brought up about how our facility there is being cared for and treated. And I would like to ensure that there is strong language in terms of how we protect our asset, how we protect the environment around our asset. And until we have some clear recognition of that, I think it's imprudent for us to make this decision to move forward. Case in point, you may have seen it, you may not have seen it, but there were a few months ago, the gentleman that's been working that facility was actually blowing plastic out of a second-story window onto the ground. Now, that's our responsibility, is it not? To maintain that, that's our property. Right now, he's got a long pipe and he's throwing it into a garbage can, but I'm not sure that that's quite what we had in mind when we had someone come in there to use our facility and to basically pollute the environment around us. So I can't support this. Hopefully other supervisors will think about this going forward, but I can't support it until I see the terms of that agreement and the details in terms of how we're going to structure this next 6 months. Thank you.
Further discussion on 304. Supervisor McGowan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I understand where Mr. Wild's coming from. I'm wondering if that I'd have to tend to believe that our attorney would make sure that these requests are all covered in the terms of the lease. Is this a possibility that she would be able to make sure we're covered, and with the foresight of also with with Mr. Moore?
Well, without objection, I'll ask our county attorney. I think the concern is that there may be other federal or state laws that might be violated, public safety, OSHA, EPA perhaps. I don't want to recite a complete list, but that could the lease, I think the question that Ms. McGowan is can the lease be drafted in such a way to ensure that all of that compliance is in order?
Yes, of course. Just with all the discussion that's been going on with D&G, I didn't want to draft the lease and have it not pass again today. So Kevin Hugos and I are actually meeting right after this meeting to draft the lease together to make sure that we get all of those protections into the lease. I also don't mind bringing it to committee next week so you can all look at it before we send it out.
I mean, I'm happy with that. It would be Mr. Wild.
Mm-hmm. Supervisor Beatty?
Yeah, this is just the authority to go ahead and go forward with the lease. This isn't, like our county attorney said, she'll put in the rest of the particulars. The lease is not intact until both parties sign it. And henceforth, at that stage, if Mr. Wild is not happy with it or any other supervisor, obviously they can vote against it. But this is not an executable lease. This is just the authority to go ahead and go forward with the lease, and then the actual details, as Ms. Kassane said, will be worked out and brought to committee. So I see this as the normal process and a very sound process.
Supervisor Strauss?
I just want to thank Supervisor Wild and his outspoken vigilance on this matter in protecting human health and the environment. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor Wild.
Further discussion on 304, Supervisor Diamond?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also agree with Supervisor Wild. I'd like to see the hard copy of the tentative lease agreement that's going to be drafted before I agree to any such terms. But I also like to point out some history that we've had with our tenant that is currently occupying that facility. It was mentioned in great detail at our last facilities meeting about some health and hazardous issues that were existing in that building. And if you look back at some reports that we had, I think it was noted here in July of 18, OSHA violations, penalties that were they were subject to penalties as regards to health issues and housekeeping. Our New York Municipal Insurance Reciprocal did an inspection. He pointed out the same thing. This was in November about housekeeping issues down there. He basically said the building is filled with fire hazards that go unaddressed, and I repeat, unaddressed. Paper, cardboard, infiltrated the emergency equipment storage area. The explosive dust hazards are very high in all of the buildings, and it went to the point to say that there was no sprinkler system. But during my research, I discovered there is, but there's no fire alarm system in that particular building. So I'd like to point that out also. And in that discussions that we had, it was basically Mr. LaFleur coming here and making us aware about the awareness of the issues there, and it was determined at that point in time that it was not safe for his equipment. So he has moved his equipment out of the facility at this point in time, and we're going to address that down the road. My concern, if it's not safe for his equipment, what about the employees' tenants that are in the building? When OSHA violated him and subjected him to penalties, they pointed it out in their report. What I'd like to suggest before we even advance this to vote on this today, that we develop a in-town housekeeping plan, which would include unspecified announcements and reviews, and we hold them to the standard. Mr. Wild brought up in January, February, March of this year, we have a housekeeping meeting. It still goes unaddressed. So my position for today's vote is that I'm going to vote.
Further discussion on 304, Ms. Breimer?
Thank you. On 304, I do support the lease. However, in deference to my colleague who would like to see the particulars of the lease agreement, I am fully in support of that. Whatever we can do to make someone feel more comfortable with the provisions in the lease agreement. And since we're having a meeting next week, I would ask that we just defer this until next week.
Is that a motion to table? Are you making a motion to table 304?
I will defer to County Administrator Moore, who's trying to catch my attention. So no.
You're not making a motion to table. Are you asking for the privilege?
Sure. Yes.
Yes. Mhm.
Just before, to give all the information that I have, which is current as of this morning, I talked to Charlie Wallace. The OSHA violations are cleared. There is currently nothing pending with OSHA. We had county staff in there yesterday. The dust issue was not a concern. The fire alarm, we're doing research in the codes department to determine whether or not that was a requirement when the building was initially built. We don't think that it was. We'll confirm that, regardless of whether or not it should have been in there already. It's our responsibility as the owner of the building to remediate that, and Charlie and Frank Morehouse are already working on it.
Further discussion on 304. Ms. Bramer,
Okay,
second time.
I'll make a motion to table 304, please.
We have a motion to table 304. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Supervisor Diamond. A motion table takes precedent. Discussion ends. We'll try this as a voice vote. Let's see how it goes. All those in favor of tabling 304 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
I think we should read the roll on this. The clerk will read the roll on the tabling motion on 304.
Mr. Loeb?
No.
Mr. Driscoll?
No.
Mrs. Frazier?
No.
Mr. Simpson?
No.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
No.
Mr. Merlino?
No.
Excuse me. Mr. Strauss?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes to table.
Mr. Beatty?
No.
Mr. McGowan?
No.
Mr. Sokol?
No.
Mr. Thomas?
No.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
No.
Mr. Leggett?
No.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
No.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
No.
The motion to table fails. They only had 320 votes in favor.
320. Motion fails. To table fails. Further discussion on 304.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Leggett?
I think I tabled this last month. And having given more time, might not have tabled it, but have worked out some of the details because it involves the Office of Emergency Services Vehicles, which has progressed and has worked out. In our resolutions, as is custom on the last line, most of these will say in a form approved by the county attorney. We grant to the county attorney the final say or authority on the form of a legal document. At the town level, we tend to do it as well with our town attorney. So with input from the board today, I think the county attorney and county administrator in negotiation with VC can make sure these items are covered. It can be brought to the committee for a further review, but I felt bad of delaying this a month. Supervisor Beatty, who was chairman of that committee, so I support moving it forward. Getting on.
Further discussion? Supervisor Wild?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'll make this brief, and it's really a request to our county attorney. And it's associated with what I feel is some lack of diligence in terms of managing our contracts. There's one point in the lease agreement that talks about the scale. This is a truck scale system. It's drive-on. It weighs the trucks. When this lease was originally signed, it was structured such that the owner of D&G was to maintain this scale system. It's in total disrepair. So one of the things that I want to do is make sure that that clause stays in the contract. And I can't understand why that clause was in there and the individual signed it that said he's going to maintain this scale system, and now it's in total disrepair. So that's something else that I'd just like to make sure that we follow through on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Just without objection, Mary, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I
So Kevin and I have brainstormed about that too, because when that lease was signed, initially that scale didn't work and it was turned over to them not working. So Kevin and I have talked about him going out there and doing a checklist of all the property and the condition it's in, so we know going forward what needs to be repaired and what is handed over broken. So we will absolutely address those concerns.
But, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
Why would an individual sign a contract that says he's going to maintain a scale that wasn't in working condition to begin with? We have to assume that that was in working condition if he signed that contract that way.
Well, we can perhaps assume that, but the individual's not here to respond to that question that you just raised. Just
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We can...
Just as a point, you know. But I understand your point. Supervisor Thomas.
Yes, in prior years, Perkins Recycling moved out of that building because the county would not replace them scales. At least that's my recollection.
Further discussion? I'm returning to supervisors multiple times here. I think I'll allow it without objection to Supervisor Beatty.
Yeah, I have complete confidence in our administrator, Mr. Moore, on this situation, our county attorney, and our DPW director, Mr. Hajos. I find all three of them very involved with this, very competent, and I'm going to allow them to do their jobs, which in this case, in this lease, Mr. Hajos has been down there numerous times. We just got an update from the county administrator. They were there yesterday. So I'm not sure how much more they can be involved. To me, they're involved 100% on this, and I'm confident that we'll come to the right conclusion on the lease and how it's worded. So,
thank you. Supervisor Bramer?
Just quickly, I mean, knowing that Supervisor Wild was able to review the prior lease makes me feel comfortable being able to move forward, knowing that his concerns of those specifics will be addressed. Thank you.
Further discussion on 304? And I'll close discussion on 304. Discussion on other resolutions. Supervisor Bramer.
I'm sorry, I don't have any more comments, but could I have a roll call on 318, please?
We have a roll call request on 318, of course.
Thank you.
Discussion on other resolutions. We'll vote on resolutions.
Okay, Resolution 299, making supplemental appropriations. Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Strauss?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 300, amending Warren County budget. Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Strauss?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 304, authorizing 6-month lease agreement with D&G Recycling. Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Strauss?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
With the opportunity to review, yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
No.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 318, authorizing Elan Planning, Landscape, Architecture, Engineering to submit a consolidated funding application. Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Strauss?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
No.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
No.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 321, ratifying actions of the county attorney in commencing litigation against David Decker. Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Abstain.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Strauss?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
No.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 323, authorizing appropriation of funds from the Gaslight Village parking fees. Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Strauss?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Nope.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 324, adopting and approving Adirondack Community College operating budget. Mr. Lowe?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Mr. Strauss?
Recuse.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde? Yes. Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes. Motion on the rest, Mr. Dickinson, Mr. Garrity on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the board regarding any matter of county business? Mr. Whitehead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We convene this meeting every third Friday because, under the law, each of you carry a certain weighted vote, and any actions that might be taken in committee or between meetings don't have the board's approval. We just found out that without the board's approval, an action was filed against David Decker. Then they went ahead and put this resolution in front of you. There was no mention. I mean, it caught me by surprise. I would be surprised if it didn't catch each of you by surprise to hear the admission that there was action prior to your approval. I find this deeply disturbing. And the reason that there is no cause of action against Queensberry is simply because we never sent them the bill. Again, send them the bill and then see what develops from there. So at any rate, we'll see how this develops. I think there's yet another cause of action here for dismissal of this lawsuit, and that'll probably be picked up by Mr. Decker's lawyer in the fact that this lawsuit was filed without your approvals. As far as Mr. Strauss' comments, I'll not address them in here, but I will address them in writing with the documentation to prove the points, as I'm not a fan of verbal sparring when the facts are available to prove the points. So you can look forward to getting that communication later on this week. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else wishing to address the board at this time from the audience? Mr. Ryan?
Just to respond to Mr. Whitehead.
More?
To respond to Mr. Whitehead, there was approval. The county attorney already has been delegated by the Board of Supervisors the authority to enter into litigation such as this. We brought this particular lawsuit to the Board of Supervisors for additional backup on it. But legally, she has the authority to do it on her own. Didn't have to come to this board.
All right. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the board at this time?
Chairman.
Be right to you. Let me finish with the audience. Anyone wishing to address the board? Mr. Loeb.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following up on Administrator Moore's comment. The support committee was well informed about this issue. We have 9 members of this board of 20 who are members of the support committee. They discussed it at length. We're fully versed in what was of the background and what was planned on as far as the schedule of filing the lawsuit. So none of this is a surprise to the support committee and members of this board who were lucky enough to attend our meeting. Thank you very much.
Fine. Announcements. Mr. Merlino.
I'd just like to make a comment. Probably the last time you'll hear me say anything about this, but it's sales tax. July now, it's July, and we haven't had really any discussion on changing the way sales tax is distributed amongst the towns. I'm very disappointed, and I was always bred and grown up on a word. When you promise somebody to do something, you do it. If you can't do it, at least you try, you did it. And I'm disappointed with some of my supervisors that are not really looking into the sales tax stuff. When this board, in this room probably, at these desks probably, came up with the way they were going to distribute sales tax revenue, they probably came up with a fair and equitable decision for that time. That's more than 30 years ago. We're still using that same system, and you've got 4 towns that are only ones that are really getting advantage of it. You got 8 towns that are losing money. And if you really want to know how much money, we got it right here. I got it right here. I mean, you're talking millions over these years. So I'm disappointed that my colleagues, I mean, I consider it stealing from the little towns. And I know you don't like to hear that. But we should all be standing up fighting for our own towns and our constituents, that we're losing sales tax revenue year by year. It's going down. But only 4 towns in this county are going up. And that's because the system that they did 30-some years ago was equal and fair then. But nobody realized that if you go by the value of your property, how much the properties in some places went up so far. And it's getting to a point, I'm going to tell all of you, and a lot of you are going to be here, 5 years from now, 8 years from now, property values can only go up. And that means some of those towns where they go up, they're only going to get more of the sales tax revenue. And that's less for the rest of us. And I'm disappointed that we haven't had any really, we talk about so many things here. Paper bags, roads, schools, government, colleges. This is an effect on towns of all our taxpayers. And it's just, you know, this is my last time you'll ever hear it from me again. But I'm disappointed that we have not had, this is July, so that means nothing could be done for next year, 2020. So we'll all have to sit here again and take the numbers that the towns are getting, and the towns that are getting money, and I'm talking, I hate to hit you out with this, but there's some towns that benefit over $10 million over this process. And a lot of them are $4 million and $2 million and $3 million. But then there's a lot of the small towns that have gone backwards. And I think it's just something that maybe when you all walk out of here tomorrow or today, think about it. We're not fighting for our people in our towns because of a few towns, I will use the word, are greedy and want as much as they can get on the backs of the rest of our citizens. This thing has to be changed. Or put a cap on how much it can keep going up, the percentage. I mean, if you want to go back a few years and go to like 10%, that leaves more money for the lower people, that their property values are not going up. We don't have lakes in a lot of towns, Warrensburg, Stony Creek, Thurman. I mean, those are towns that are really struggling. Glens Falls, and I don't know why 5 of you there are not jumping up and down to work on something. You guys pay the most tax in this Warren County on your property. And the worst part of it is if most people don't, the business people should be involved. Because you've got a hotel in your town that's paid twice as much as somebody further north because they live in a different town and have a different tax structure. Car dealerships. So it's not just Gene Marino want to do something for Lake Luzerne. I think there should be time that we sit down and really talk about this. Thank you for your time.
Hey, you're welcome. Believe me, if I wasn't chairman of the board, I would jump in for 20 minutes on this. Supervisor Loeb.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no self-interest for City of Glens Falls. More for the county and the fact that we need to support all corners of the county. If this is appropriate wording, I would like to make a motion that we form an ad hoc committee to investigate this issue further and give recommendations to the board.
Well, the matter is presently before a standing committee, so I'm not sure the purpose of an ad hoc committee. It's presently before Laws and Rules. At the last Laws and Rules meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, John, there was no interest, or at least not a majority interest, to change the formula at that time or propose changing the formula at that time. It's presently before Laws and Rules. We have devoted an enormous amount of time to this, although some may think not. A 30-page report was prepared. It took our county administrator an enormous amount of time to prepare that report. If you have not reviewed that report, I would encourage all of you to please look at that report. That report sheds an enormous amount of light on this entire issue as to what the origin of the sales tax is, why it exists, the tables, the implications. So I would encourage all of you to look at that report, and if you have any matter, please bring it before the Laws and Rules Committee. That's what our standing committee is, and it's a very large committee, representing quite the cross-section of this board.
And when is that committee meeting next?
Next meeting of Laws and Rules? They're not scheduled at this point. That would be to Mr. Strau as to whether he chooses to schedule a meeting or not. And the I mean, we've had this chamber full of people before we've even had a public hearing on this. I don't want to get into it too much because I'm sitting here as the chair. When we wish to get into this, I'll remove myself as chair, and then you'll get your earful from Ron Conover on this issue. You know, I mean, fundamentally, we do not share the expense of government on a population basis. And so the state law is designed in a certain way. Of the 10 counties where cities preempt, 8 do it as we do it. The other 2 leave most of the money with the county. I mean, and so I would encourage you to look at that report and really take a look at it and understand that report and why the numbers and why that information is the way it is. And we had quite a presentation, and frankly, if perhaps we could have Mr. Moore revisit that report at one of your meetings, John, and he could go through that report once again.
I'd be open to that.
Mr. McGowan.
Yes. I've had many different thoughts, and I've done my own looking into it, and you know, and really the basic understanding is I understand, Gene, that we need to do something, and like I stated one before, we're really, our hands are tied unless Glens Falls wants to jump in and make some changes on the way they collect their sales tax and hang on to it. But also, I have looked into what these upper towns get and what they pay back toward the county levy. So, you know, it's kind of from what my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, you know, it's like a balance act. The more they get, the more, the county, the more their responsibility on the county level. And unfortunately, the only easiest way really to look at it, and I hate to say this on the mic, but is raising the sales tax. And in that case, you know, we can distribute that, maybe possibly distribute that money a little differently. I hate to say that, but I would only be considering this if Washington County would be interested also in raising their sales tax. So, you know, like I said, I've had some lengthy conversations, and I've read Mr. Molino's report, and we have talked about it, and like I said, it's something that I think that, Mr. Strau, we really need to have that meeting to address it, because it was stated at the beginning of the year that we'd do something about it or look into it, and I believe with Mr. Marino, I don't want him to quiet down quite yet.
So, Mr. Shaw, if you would consider the subject matter at your earliest convenience.
Yes, I will, and I'll speak with Amanda about setting this as the primary topic at the next Legislative and Rules Committee meeting.
Okay, very good. Anyone else wishing to address the board on any announcements?
Motion to adjourn?
Summertime, nothing happening in...
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, wait a minute, I thought so. Here it comes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All
I
right.
just want to, for a few months I've been talking about Food Truck Fridays in Horicon. And I got to say, I haven't seen too many events that have outpaced our population in Horicon. But this Food Truck Fridays has been very successful. It's grown. We've got a lot of interest of other people that want to come and be part of it, and this is going to evolve. And I just want to invite everybody again. We're having this every Friday night, 5 to 8, every Friday night through Labor Day. It's a great variety, great fun, casual. You listen to some music. There's bring your chairs if you come, because we have picnic tables. But last week we had 850 people. The week before we had about 1,900, and the first week we had 1,200. So it's been quite a experience, and the volunteers and the organizers that have taken this on have done just an incredible job of promoting it and making it an enjoyable event.
You're welcome. Any other announcements? Motion to Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, and I'll keep it short, but I will confirm Food Truck Friday is a good place to be. Again, the Common Ground Alliance Forum on Wednesday. You can register online through the anchor site, which is adirondack.org. It's a great forum to come in and talk about issues that affect our area and our region. Please look into it. Please attend. Thank you.
You're welcome. Motion to adjourn. Supervisor Beatty, Dickinson on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, everyone.
Good.